How do you deal with conflict? Do you adjust your character based upon the people you're dealing with? Oftentimes, our natural reaction to our circumstances is to want to step outside of our character. For instance, if a car cuts us off in traffic, our natural reaction may lead us to, depending on our road rage levels, right? May lead us to wanting to follow behind the vehicle very closely, or pull up next to the car and start staring the driver down intensely, right? I know everybody's participated in a stare down at some point. Or even yelling and screaming or gesturing and cursing or whatever the case is about them not knowing how to drive, or the fact that they cut you off or they almost killed you, right? How about, when someone else treats us badly? Our natural reaction is to return the favor, right? We decide not that when they go low, we go high, but when they go low, we go lower, right? The natural reaction is to try to treat them the way that they treated us. If they were rude, we respond rudely. If they're yelling, then we start yelling back. If they wouldn't help us with something, then you know what? I ain't helping you either. And although going with our natural reactions may feel good for that very moment, right? Like, the reality is, or the thing that we need to consider is, what does it resolve? What do we accomplish? Like, literally, what do we accomplish by angrily speeding past that person that cut us off in traffic? What exactly is that doing for us? What happens when we respond rudely to someone who is rude to us? What is the benefit of that? Just because it makes us feel good? Because we want to be petty too? Like, if someone doesn't want to help us when needed, does the later refusal to help them change the fact that they didn't help us? What exactly is that doing for you or me? Nothing. Responding based on our natural frustrated reactions typically only really leads to even more anxiety or frustration or helplessness on our end. At the end of the day, we're the one that's over here bothered, and these other people have pretty much gone about their day. So think about what would happen if everyone responded in a manner that was opposite of our natural feelings. If we were kind even to those people who are not so kind, if we ignored the person who cuts us off in traffic without doing the most afterwards to let them know that we saw and we didn't appreciate their driving, if we did for others without regard to what they can do for us, in the same way that our negative actions cause us to respond negatively, our positive response could influence them to become more positive. I remember when I first moved to my neighborhood, I was at the post office. And I go in, and the postal worker, the post office lady behind the counter, she was just in the worst mood, just stank attitude, wasn't greeting customers, slamming and slinging boxes and things. Like, she just was not having the best day. Wasn't having the best day, or just didn't have the best attitude. And I remember I walked up to her counter. I was praying that I wasn't even going to get her as the person who was going to ring me up. But anyways, I did. So I walked over to her counter, and I just was like, "Hi, how are you? How's your day going?" Not in a sarcastic manner, but in a genuine, like, "Hey, how are you?" And this lady literally stopped and looked at me and said, "Excuse me?" And I said, "How are you? Hi, how are you?" And she said, "I thought that's what you said, but nobody ever asked me how I'm doing, so I wasn't sure." Actually, I'm doing okay. Actually, I'm not doing okay. I'm having a really tough day. And we had a whole dialogue and conversation, and this lady had a tough day. And, I wished her well, and I, gave her a couple of little motivational statements to kind of help her guide, throughout her day. And, walked away, told her bye, have a great rest of your day. I hope you have, things get better for you, whatever. When I say every time I've walked into that post office since, I have not experienced that same attitude. I have not seen that same attitude. Was it because of me? Probably not. However, being able to recognize that we all are human beings and we all go through things. And sometimes people are going to be having a bad day. Should they be working in customer service if they're having a bad day? Probably not. But everybody got a job. Some of y'all go to work and you don't want to be there. And you might have a bad attitude. You just never know, yo. So anyway, I said all that to say, try responding differently next time you're in a situation that feels like it's just super negative. And instead of feeding into that, instead of shifting your character in the moment to be more in alignment with the negative piece or the negative energy of that space, try flipping it and be in that light when you walk into that room or when you walk up to that person or when you passing by that car or whatever it is. And just see how that gets you. Make that your habit instead of going lower. Because at the end of the day, who wants to be low anyway?